Well, it's primarily a constitutional debate, and for me it's about control. It's about getting control of our lawmaking, control of our borders, control of our money. I think that it's unacceptable in a democratic country to have our democratic parliament overruled by an unelected European court that can tell us what laws we must have. I think we need to deal with the question of who can settle in the UK, because we've seen 184,000 EU migrants just in the past year. And of course, we're sending net about £10 billion worth of taxpayers' money to the EU, which I think would be much better spent on our own priorities.
That's an argument in the case of the UK, but what about Gibraltar? Do you honestly believe that Gibraltar would be better off outside the European Union?
Well, I think that together we are better off, because I think it's about a different type of future. It's about countries being able to set their own regulations, to set their own rules under which they operate, their own financial freedoms. And I think that's a different way of looking at the world. The European Union, so tied now to the euro, which is tearing apart the social fabric of the south of Europe in particular, with a whole generation of young Europeans being denied access to any hope of prosperity, many of them migrating to other parts of the European Union now. At the same time, we're seeing the rise of nationalism across the EU. You see it in France, you've seen it even in Germany, you've seen it in Austria recently, and that for me is indicative of a failing model. And we want to be in an open, agile, flexible world, not one that's as ossified as the European Union's becoming.
In the case of Gibraltar, of course, our entire financial model is based on belonging to the European Union and access to the single market. Our finance centre relies very, very heavily on that membership. Do you not feel that perhaps we would miss out on opportunities, on financial opportunities here in Gibraltar if we were to leave the EU?
Well, one of the key elements of that is the concept of passporting and being able to get into the European market. That is guaranteed anyway by something called MiFID 2, which comes in January 2017. And what it says is that you don't have to be part of the single market to get access to it. You need to have what's called regulatory equivalence, so a country that's got the same sort of regulations. And given that the UK began this process, it's logical that we're there with that. So that's a bit of a red herring. And of course, I understand that in Gibraltar, people will be concerned about the relationship with Spain. And first of all, nowadays with a democratic government, it's much harder just to say we're going to leave 10,000 of our own citizens unemployed because they can't get into Gibraltar.
Well, it might be harder, but they have said it. The Spanish Foreign Secretary has threatened to close the border if the UK leaves the European Union. Number
one, I don't think you should make decisions about your future on the basis of being bullied. Number two, I think that you need to question whether that's the club you want to belong to, if that's the way they speak to one another. And number three, and perhaps most importantly, it's a pity the Prime Minister wasn't able to speak in Gibraltar because of the tragedy back in the United Kingdom. But on one side of the debate, he's campaigning to remain, and I'm campaigning to leave, but our message would have been very identical, which is that the British government will protect the identity of Gibraltarians and the British sovereignty here, and we will do whatever is required to make that a reality.
A few weeks ago, the Foreign Secretary was here in Gibraltar, and he said that the UK's ability to protect Gibraltar would be severely limited by leaving the European Union.
I think that for any British Foreign Secretary to say that is unacceptable, because you do not ever negotiate from what sounds like a position of weakness. And our commitment has to be absolute. That's why the Prime Minister would have said, that's why I would have said that our commitment is 100%, and there should be no misreading of that by Spain. There is no question of change in sovereignty. There is no question of a change in security. Absolutely, unequivocally.